Okay. Hi. Good evening. Let me see. Welcome. I'll give us a moment for people to join us. Okay. We have people are logging on right now. So we'll give it another couple seconds and we'll get started. But what I'm going to do right now is I'd like to ask a quick question, and I'll leave this up. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, my poll question disappeared. I always cancel. Okay. Okay, here we go. Going to publish this poll. I would like to know, before we get started, which CB pet market or Cherrybrook destination do you frequently visit? Everybody can just take a moment to answer that while we wait for some more people to join us. Okay. Okay, all righty. Let's get started. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Claudia Loomis, president of the newly rebranded CB Pet Market, formerly the Cherrybrook Retail Stores. I'm going to be your moderator tonight. CB Pet Market and Pets Global, whose pet food brands include Signature Select, Essence, Inception, and Fussy Cat, are hosting this webinar because dilated cardiomyopathy, DCM, is a concern to many pet parents. Since June of 2019, when the FDA first announced that there may be a potential link to DCM in grain-free foods, and even though they walked that warning back several months later, DCM continues to be top of mind for many pet parents. Frequently in our stores, customers ask about DCM, the big three pet food brands, and beg diets. We hear from our veterinarians, from internet searches, friends, and family members about this subject. But what's being done? Behind the scenes, studies and research are underway, hoping to find a connection or disprove one. All the while, we as pet parents are left begging for answers. So we just want to do right by our pets. Tonight, Dr. Bradley Quest, leader of the veterinary service practice for BSM Partners, will talk with us about feeding trials, DCM, and studies being conducted by research veterinarians, among them BSM Partners. Some of this work is even being funded by Pets Global and other pet food companies, so it's not just the big three that are doing the research. Before I turn the webinar over to Dr. Quest, I want to give you a brief overview of how tonight's webinar will run. Dr. Quest's formal presentation will last about 50 minutes. At the end of the presentation, Dr. Quest will answer some specific questions which you can send in via chat at any time during the presentation. I will read the questions aloud for Dr. Quest to answer, and I will not call out any brands of pet food unless it's a specific question about Pets Global or the research that Dr. Quest is involved in, which he is able to discuss. If we run out of time and we do not get to your specific questions, you are welcome to email me directly after the webinar. I will do my best to answer your question or direct your question to somebody who can. Dr. Quest, please share a little bit about yourself and your experience and BSM and take us through your presentation. And thank you for joining us tonight.
No, thank you, Claudia. I appreciate the kind words and appreciate everybody taking part of their evening tonight to listen to what we have to talk about here. A little bit about myself. My name is Brad Quest, like Claudia said, and I'm the principal veterinarian at BSM Partners. Before I got into the pet food industry, I had my own veterinary practice for 10 years in a small town in Northwest Missouri. If you've ever read James Herriot's All Creatures Great and Small, That was basically who I was for the beginning of my career. I got into the pet food industry, though, about 18 years ago. Started with a small mom and pop company that was acquired by a very large pet food company, and then worked for them for quite a while. Decided that I wanted to get back into the consulting, working with other companies, smaller companies, doing more research, and so here we are. I want to talk a little bit about our company itself, and this will lead into some of the slides I've got to follow. But BSM Partners is a full service pet food industry consulting company. We do product development, we do clinical nutrition, veterinary services, independent research, as well as branded research. We have a food safety and quality assurance practice. We have a business development and transformation practice. And then we also have an engineering practice. We have a lot of folks with a lot of advanced degrees, experience, and education within our company. I think that's really important because a lot of times I've read talk and heard people say that smaller pet food companies, if you're not part of the big three, you don't necessarily have credentialed people working on your products. And just to kind of share some of that experience with you, we have PhD animal nutritionists, we have veterinary nutritionists, we have PhD food scientists, we have veterinarians, certified veterinary technologists, masters in food safety and quality assurance, MBAs, and masters in engineering within our firm. So having said that, we'll kind of get into the talk now that you know a little bit about me and a little bit about our company. So, and Claudia mentioned the acronym BEG, and a lot of y'all have probably seen that. It's been in a lot of articles. What it has been explained to me that it means is the B stands for boutique, which is going to refer to small pet food companies. And a lot of times I think there's this mindset that if you're not a large company, that you don't have the resources to make quality pet food and do pet food feeding studies and do nutritional research and have nutritionists formulating and working on your brand. And I would say that most of the folks within our companies have worked for both large pet food companies as well as small pet food companies. A lot of folks in our companies have done their own consulting before they came to join our company. And that's really a good thing because you get a really good dichotomy of working on really large brands as well as small brands as well. One thing that I've also heard is because company XYZ makes this food that it has to be good, and I've also heard folks ask me, this food must be good because it's made by brand X, and what I tell folks is contact the company, ask them if they have nutritional information that they can share with you, ask them if they have feeding studies that they can share with you. That's going to tell you a lot about the company, and it doesn't really matter whether it's a large or a small company. One of the other questions that I get is, do large pet food companies do feeding studies with all their pet foods? And, I answered that, you should probably ask them, but having worked for large pet food companies, I can tell you that's not usually the case for various reasons. And we'll talk a little bit about that in some of the slides that when we talk about the feeding studies. But I think one of the really important thing is do other pet food companies other than the big three do feeding studies as well? And I just got done saying that's definitely one of the things when consumers, pet parents, want to know about a different brand or want to know what kind of research that they've done, they should ask about those, and they should ask if the company makes those results available. But the answer to that is yes, and I can tell you, unequivocally, I've got a lot of colleagues in the industry, that do similar work to what we do. Most of them don't have the overall resources that we do, but they still do good work. And there's a lot of people, including us, that conduct pet food feeding studies, for other brands as well. But again, the best thing I can recommend is contact the company themselves and ask them to share what kind of feeding studies that they've done. So one of the other things that I get asked a lot is what exactly is AAFCO, and what do they do? So AAFCO is an acronym, and it stands for the American Association of Feed Control Officials. I think one misconception is that AAFCO is a regulatory body, but it actually isn't. It's made up of a lot of regulatory officials at both the state and the federal level, but it also has industry representation. AAFCO will set nutritional guidelines for different diets and different diet categories. They will set the feeding study guidelines that we're going to talk a little bit about later too. But it's also made up of FDA and state regulators as well. So pet food is regulated kind of at two levels. The FDA does have regulatory oversight over pet food, but also each individual state has regulatory oversight. And it's always been my experience in working both for large companies and small companies, and now doing independent consulting, that you really have to focus on the individual state regulators as much as you focus on the federal level at the FDA. So one of the other questions, and as you can tell, I set this talk up a little bit to try to answer things that I get asked a lot by both industry folks as well as pet parents. But one of the things you may have heard about, especially in the DCM topic or in some of the articles that have been published, is this thing called WSAVA. So WSAVA is the World Small Animal Veterinary Association. And WSAVA does a lot of things. They set guidelines for a lot of things, including nutrition for companion animals. And I just put up kind of some of the guidelines that are on the WSAVA website, and you can actually go there. There's a lot more information there, but some of these things, and most of these are very important, and these are for industry folks, for consumers and pet parents. You can use these as a guideline when you're talking to a pet food company and you want to know more about them. But some of the things that they recommend asking is, do you employ full-time qualified nutritionists? Who formulates your foods, and what are their credentials? Are the diets tested using AAFCO feeding trials or by formulation and analysis to meet the AAFCO nutrient profiles? Where do you produce your foods? What kind of quality control measures do you use to ensure that the food and the ingredients in the end product are going to be safe? Do you provide nutritional analysis for your diets? And what kind of product research or what kind of feeding studies have you done? So, going back to the previous slide a little bit and talking about AAFCO allows pet food companies, and you've probably seen these on their bag. They should be on every bag or tray or canned, diet that you purchase. So AAFCO allows pet food companies to substantiate nutritional adequacy by two ways, and these are actually verbatim taken from the AAFCO guidelines. In that, a certain pet food is formulated to meet the nutritional levels established by AAFCO, be that dog or cat, food nutrient profile for all life stages. And I just used all life stages as an example. You could also have it as adult maintenance. The other way that AAFCO allows it is animal feeding tests or studies using AAFCO procedures substantiate that this particular brand's pet food provides complete and balanced nutrition for all life stages. So what's the difference, and does it really matter? So the first example means that a pet food has been formulated, we're assuming by a qualified individual, to meet the AAFCO guidelines for all the macro and micronutrients. The macronutrients would be like protein, fat, fiber, and then the micronutrients would be, the vitamins, minerals, or if it was supplemented with individual amino acids, for instance. So that's one way, through formulation. The other way that they allow it is to actually do a feeding study, and we're going to talk about those in a little bit. Doing a feeding study where the animals are monitored, different health parameters are measured, and at the end of the feeding study, a qualified individual, usually a veterinarian, will then deem that diet is adequate for whatever life stage that the company is claiming. So we mentioned already a little bit about AAFCO feeding studies. So basically what, and these are all available if you're more interested in details on how these are conducted. This is all available on the internet. But an AAFCO feeding study has to have at least 8 healthy dogs. They're 6 months in length. There's required a veterinary exam by a licensed accredited veterinarian at the beginning and the end of the study. The dogs are weighed every week, and there cannot be more than 10% body weight loss on average across all 8 dogs through the study, and no more than 15% of each individual dog. Now, the interesting thing is AAFCO allows 25% of the animals to be removed from the study for non-nutritional causes, and this would be something along the lines like if a pet were to able to have some kind of an illness that would require them to be removed from the study, but it cannot be nutritionally related. One interesting thing is there's really no guideline on the amount of food that needs to be offered during the study, and there's only 4 individual blood parameters are measured, and that's only at the end of the study. So a few years ago, BSM Partners, we kind of looked at these AAFCO feeding studies, and we had clients that were doing them, and we thought there was a lot to be desired. In other words, if a pet food company was going to take the time and the effort and the expense to conduct feeding studies, we felt like the protocol needed to be a lot more robust. And then one of the interesting things too that we thought would also add to the value of the feeding study is to actually do them with privately owned dogs. We call them in-home AAFCO feeding studies. All of the canine AAFCO feeding studies that we do or that we conduct at BSM Partners are all done with privately owned in-home dogs. In fact, a lot of times I've got 3 pointers, and a lot of times they'll be on one of the feeding studies. But a lot of the things are the same. We use 8 healthy in-home dogs. They're 6 months long. We do the weekly body weights, but we also do stool quality scoring. We think it's important because most consumers, most pet parents, they're interested in what the stool quality is that a diet's going to produce. We do veterinary exams at the beginning, middle, and end of the study. We also do body condition scoring and muscle condition scoring at the beginning, middle, and end of the study. And then one of the other things that we like to do is we individually customize the amount of food offered to each individual animal based on its daily caloric needs. I mentioned that I have pointers that are very active dogs. A lot of the dogs that we have on our feeding studies are super active dogs. Some of them are field trial dogs and hunting dogs. They burn a lot of calories depending on the time of the year. So what we do is we actually, each week we will individually calculate how much food that dog needs, based on its body weight and its body condition score. We do a lot of additional blood work. We measure 45 different blood health parameters at at the beginning, middle, and end of the study, and that actually includes plasma amino acids as well as taurine and carnitine. You've probably heard of taurine and carnitine. They've been in print a lot lately, especially as it relates to some of the DCM research. And I'll talk a little bit more about those. Neither taurine nor carnitine, as it currently stands with the AAFCO nutrient guidelines, nor the NRC guidelines, are required for dogs. However, there's a lot of folks thinking that there might be some individuals that could definitely benefit from taurine and carnitine supplementation. We also measure cardiac biomarkers. Cardiac biomarkers are blood metabolites that you can measure that will give you kind of a broad indication of cardiac health. You've probably heard, and it's been around in human medicine for quite some time, where somebody might think they might have had, say, a mild heart attack, and you can go in and your cardiologist can actually do some blood work to try to see if indeed there was something there that could have indicated that. And what they're doing is they're looking at cardiac biomarkers that are actually present in blood. And then to further measure cardiac health, we do echocardiograms on the dogs at the beginning and the end of the study to try to look at as much as we can of the cardiovascular health of the dogs on the study. So another study that really is just as important as a digestibility study. And so the reason this is important is, you can formulate a diet to meet all the AAFCO and NRC nutrient requirements for dogs or cats for that matter. But what you really also want to know is how bioavailable those nutrients are. And AAFCO has a protocol for that, and we pretty much follow that protocol. About the only difference is we also do those with in-home dogs. We don't typically do those at like a contract facility. In fact, like I mentioned, Dr. Clark, who works with me, she and I, most of the time we use our own dogs for these. They're 10 days long. The first 5 days is an acclimation where you just get the dog's digestive tract used to the diet. And then the second 5 days, of course, the dog's still eating the diet, but you also do a complete stool collection. We weigh the food and then you weigh it back, whatever they don't eat, if they don't eat at all. And so that way what the dog has consumed every day. Those last 5 days you collect the stool, it's all weighed. And then the diet and the stool samples from each of the 6 dogs are sent to a lab to do a nutrient analysis on both the diet and the stool. And then through a calculation, we can actually determine the percent total digestibility of the diet. And like I mentioned before, this is real important to know because just doing analysis on a diet cannot tell you this. You have to feed it to know what the bioavailability of the nutrients are. And then one thing I also like to mention too is nothing's 100% digestible. If it was, then there would not be any waste. Typically what I like to see a diet be a dry diet be, at least 80% digestible. Now, a lot of the diets that we do studies on can get as high as 90%. I've seen a few even go over that, but a lot of that depends on the type of diet too. Some diets with higher levels of fiber, like a weight management diet, they're actually going to be lower in digestibility just because that fiber isn't real digestible, but it does have other health benefits too. So Claudia had mentioned Pets Global. Pets Global does a lot of feeding studies, and I've conducted a lot of feeding studies for those folks. In fact, I think I've probably done more feeding studies for Pets Global than any brand in the past several years, and probably more feeding studies by one brand, including the large brands that I've worked with, than pretty much anybody I can think of. So we've done digestibility studies on all 13 varieties of the signature diets, and then we actually extended those. I mentioned earlier that a digestibility study is 10 days. We decided to extend those to 28 days because we wanted to actually look at what the taurine levels were in those dogs, so we could also pull blood on the dogs and send that into the lab and get taurine results too. But all 13 of those digestibility studies, all of them were greater than 82% digestible, which is really good. And then all the dogs on all studies, all their blood taurine levels actually increased over that 28-day period. And then we decided that it would be a good idea to do even a longer study. And we picked the signature kangaroo diet. And we measured a lot more things in this study. Not only did we measure taurine, but we looked at carnitine. We looked at other health parameters like complete blood counts, serum chemistry profiles, and urinalysis, just to measure overall health of the dogs. All the results were really good and similar to the digestibility studies that I talked about previously. All of those dogs' taurine and carnitine levels actually increased over that 60-day period. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the longer studies, the 6-month AAFCO studies that we've done. So, like Claudia mentioned, Pets Global really has 3 brands of canine diets: the Signature, the Inception, and the Essence line. And we've done AAFCO feeding studies on all of those lines. But we did these again with our in-home protocol. All of these studies were actually done with super high active, I like to call them canine athletes, field trial dogs. If you can't tell, I have a real passion for bird dogs. I have pointers, and my son has short hair, and I have a lot of friends and a lot of folks that I know that have a lot of those types of dogs, and they're a really good model to do feeding studies with, I think, because I tell folks it's kind of like if I was going to develop some kind of a energy supplement or a sports drink, and I tested it with an NBA or an NFL athlete. That's the type of dogs that are on these feeding studies. But the way we do them is we use the same manufacturing lot of food throughout the entire study. So at the beginning of the study, we will literally inventory in enough food to last all of those dogs for the entire 6 months. And I think that means a lot because we know we're testing the exact same lot of food throughout the whole study. We do complete blood counts, the serum chemistries, cardiac biomarkers, plasma and whole blood taurine, plasma amino acids. They were all normal, and in a lot of cases above what the recommendations are, above what the laboratory's reference ranges are. The taurine concentrations all increased in these dogs throughout the study. Their body condition score and muscle condition scores were ideal, but you also have to remember the way we conduct these is every week I'm weighing these dogs, and we're adjusting. Most of the time we're adjusting diets up or down. Like this time of year, in the fall, these dogs are super active in their field trial work, and every week I just keep bumping food up because these dogs are burning a ton of calories. And also important is stool quality. Each week, when I make my rounds through all the dogs on my AAFCO feeding studies, and then of course, their pet parents are watching stool quality scores on a daily basis too, and I've trained them, what to look for and how to score those too. But overall, the physical performance of these dogs was exceptional on all of these different diets throughout the entire study, which I think speaks, volumes for these diets. Talk a little bit about the Inception Digestibility Study. Again, we used the in-home protocol, 10 days. This particular diet had an 84% total caloric digestibility. And if you remember, really anything above 80, I think is really good. So we had a really good digestibility study with the Inception brand. And then I've got a couple more Essence that are actually ongoing. We just started, about a month ago now, the Essence LIR Landfowl and the Essence Original Ranch and Meadow. And in fact, Thursdays are usually my AAFCO days where I make the rounds and do all the dog weights and the stool quality scores. So I actually saw all these dogs this morning. They're all doing really great on those diets. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about DCM. So DCM stands for dilated cardiomyopathy. And, I'm an old guy, and, back when I was in school, I can remember really the only known cause for DCM back then was genetic. Dobermans, Great Danes, Boxers, English Bulldogs, Newfoundlands, Portuguese Water Dogs, Cocker Spaniels, and then actually more recently, I think it's highly likely that Golden Retrievers have a genetic component, or some of them do, to DCM. There's been a lot of really good research by a lot of super smart people, cardiologists as well as nutritional folks. And it's also been brought to light that, there are inflammatory diseases like myocarditis that can also lead to DCM. There's a cardiologist, he's actually in Italy. He's a colleague of one of the cardiologists in New York that I collaborate with. And he has done a lot of research into myocarditis, causing DCM. We also know that if you have limiting sulfur-containing amino acids such as cysteine and methionine, which dogs actually utilize along with other micronutrients to biosynthesize taurine, but if some of those sulfur-containing amino acids are deficient, that could actually cause DCM too. And there's been plenty of research through the years, to demonstrate this, which then kind of leads us to this other. And that's, I think, what's been probably in the media and been in front of folks and been on folks' minds here the past probably 3+ years now. What could be causing some of these other dogs that are getting DCM? So, there's been some suggestions by some research that they feel like it's linked to diets that are BEG, or they're made by small manufacturers. They use exotic ingredients, and in many cases, they're grain-free. A lot of academic and veterinary researchers have published a lot of research papers. Most of these have been compilations of retrospective case study reports. In other words, they may work in an academic veterinary teaching hospital, and they see what they think are trends about dogs that come through their services. Start looking at diets, start looking at other things, and then make the conclusion that a lot of this is diet related, and then report that as such. The FDA back in 2018, and they had a couple of public releases in 2019, and these are actually on the FDA website. If you haven't looked at them, you can go there right now and see them. But the FDA kind of jumped on board with this and asked for veterinarians, consumers, pet parents to report any case of DCM that they think is diet related. Well, the problem with that is you now put the onus of deciding what the cause is on referring veterinarians, general practicing veterinarians, and pet parents. And what they should have done is asked for all cases of DCM, regardless of what the pet was eating. That way you'd have a lot better idea of percentages of what dogs were eating versus the numbers of DCM cases we're reporting. Because, you're going to get what you ask for. If you ask for DCM cases where dogs were eating grain-free diets, that's what you're going to get. the FDA, in conjunction with Kansas State University, hosted, we call it a colloquium. It's just a fancy name for trying to put a bunch of academic and industry experts and researchers and nutrition people together to try to share information about this. And they did that in September 2020. BSM Partners was a part of that. And basically after that, and the FDA made a public release in November of 2020. It's been their last public release. And basically they said that, they're not going to make a lot of noise about this until there's more definitive research brought forward, or research that they think is definitive. And, I would also say that a lot of folks at BSM Partners, we've actually met with the FDA CVM. That's a branch of the FDA, the Center for Veterinary Medicine. They're the specific group that's looking at this, and we've met with them several times. Now, this was unfortunately before COVID. Then when COVID hit, it kind of shut down all kinds of meetings with agencies in DC and Maryland. But, one of the things that became very obvious to us early on is that, what the FDA does is they take information that's brought to them, and then they evaluate it and then decide whether, it's credible or not, or whether it's something that they want to act on or not. They're not necessarily doing their own research. And I think a lot of that is how this started. A lot of folks brought things to them that they felt very strongly about, and the FDA acted upon that. So, are other folks besides the academic researchers looking at this? And, the answer is yes. We are, and this is the folks on this this title here. This is part of our research team at BSM Partners. We published this literature review back, I'm trying to remember, mid-2020. This was actually published in the Journal of Animal Science, which is probably the oldest animal health journal in the world. And we also know, or I've heard this from other folks, that this article has been the most widely read article that they've ever published. And I'm not trying to toot our horn. I know, because it's a very polarizing topic for a lot of people. But basically, and this is available, and it's free. You can go read it for yourself. We actually made it what's called open access, so you don't have to belong to any kind of a organization to access this. You can go, search it on the internet, open it up. In fact, there's a link there on that slide. You can take a picture of it and type that in, and it'll take you right to it. I'll warn you though, it's pretty long. But basically what this is it's a literature review, and that's all it is. We looked at everything that we could possibly find around DCM, specifically as it relates to nutritional DCM, and published this in the Journal of Animal Science. And I'll try to summarize what our findings were. Despite, the recent publications or communications that's been out there, the literature does not support a potential relationship between grain-free dog food and/or exotic protein diets to DCM. Now, I'm not saying that it's not possible that anything could be related to it. I'm talking about research as it stands now is not definitive. There is no evidence for an increase in DCM in dogs overall, and this includes both non-predisposed breeds and mixed breed dogs. I think that's important because what I've read in published articles is that folks feel like they're seeing increases in dogs that are not typically genetically predisposed, meaning Dobermans, Great Danes, Cockers, Boxers, and so forth. And then, a little editorializing on my part about a lot of other studies that have been published is there's a lot of limitations. Most of them are retrospective. In other words, go back, look through medical records, compile dogs that were diagnosed with DCM, look for commonalities between those, and then try to make conclusions with that. When we have analyzed the data in a lot of these, what we find is, we feel like there's too many variables, there's too many confounding factors. There's in most of them, there's a real overrepresentation of predisposed breeds. In other words, breeds that are going to get DCM no matter what kind of food they're eating, or a certain percentage of those breeds will. And in a retrospective study, there's no control group, probable sampling bias, and in a lot of cases, lack of standardization in both treatments and procedures. And I think that's important in any research. Standardizing a protocol is super important. And then there's been so many inconsistencies in both the FDA communication and then in a lot of opinion-based articles. You can get on a lot of pet food websites or nutrition. I call them lay nutrition websites, and not that folks aren't entitled to their opinion, but what I usually tell folks is, look at the source. Look at if the paper has citations, if it's an actual peer-reviewed publication, then you can probably put more faith in that than just an opinion-based article, especially when you're talking about something as complicated as this. One of the other research studies that we did, and this is actually sitting on a site now called Biomarkers. It's pending full publication in a peer-reviewed journal, but this was actually born out of the very first meeting we had with the FDA. So the FDA told us that DCM is on the increase. And we're like, well, that's really interesting. Can you share the data with us that supports that? Well, they didn't have that. And we asked them, were they going to get that data? And they said they weren't. So we decided to do it. So what we did is we pulled as many cardiology or referral veterinary hospitals that had cardiologists as we could. We talked to over 80 referral hospitals that had a board certified cardiologist. And what we did, it was really simple. What we asked them for, could you share your how many dogs that you diagnosed in a year with DCM, and then also share with us what your overall caseload is. In other words, how many dogs come in, on your cardiology service, not necessarily for DCM, but for everything. And we thought this would be a really good way to try to trend year on year whether DCM was actually increasing or not. And what we found, and then the other thing we did is we actually were able to obtain some JFK Nielsen data on grain-free dog food sales. Now, this is just grain-free pet food sales overall, but this so if you look at the blue bars and the only years that they had the data for, they didn't have anything back further than 2011. But as you can see, in 2011, grain-free pet food sales were a little bit underneath $1 million there. And then you can see a steady increase clear up through 2019. In fact, and this is a very conservative estimate because these data do not contain internet sales. So this is only brick and mortar sales. But you can still see it's more than a 5-fold increase from 2011 to 2019. The red line across is DCM incidence. So along the right side, you can see there's some percentages there. So, and this is a compilation of the cardiology services that were able to provide us data. So as far back, and we actually have data from some hospitals from 20 years back. I just put it up here to 2011 because that's all the grain-free sales data we had. But it's still, if you extended that line to the left, it would just kind of be flat like it is there. But you can see that DCM incidence in cardiology referral practice has stayed somewhere between about 3.75% and 4.75%, really for the past 20 years. It really hasn't changed. You get a few dips up or down, But overall, we would consider that statistically not significant, meaning it's not changing. And then really, I think what is probably the most important research that we're actually doing at BSM Partners is doing a prospective study. And this means that we are actually making diets, custom diets, both grain-free and grain-inclusive diets, and feeding them to dogs. And then we're measuring a lot of health parameters. We're looking at a lot of the same things that we look at in the BSM Partners Afco studies. We look at amino acids. We're also looking at fecal metabolites, bile acids, looking at the fecal microbiome, looking at taurine and carnitine concentrations, not only in blood, but also in cardiac and skeletal muscle as well. So the objective of this research study is determine whether the presence of legumes and or absence of grains negatively impacts absorption and metabolism of amino acids. And the reason this is important is because we know, remember earlier I talked about one of the known causes of DCM is if you know you're deficient in certain sulfur containing or better known as essential amino acids. And so what we're trying to do is determine whether or not these different diets can have problems with that. Previous reports hypothesized that these grain-free, legume-rich diets affect the metabolism of amino acids, possibly resulting in amino acid deficiencies that can lead to dilated cardiomyopathy. To our knowledge, no controlled study this large in dogs has been performed to test this hypothesis. So a little bit more about the study design itself. So it was a 6-month study. We had, again, 4 different diets. These are custom diets that BSM Partners actually formulated and made. They were designed to be representative of diets currently in the marketplace. We had 2 grain-free diets and 2 grain-inclusive diets, 16 dogs per diet treatment group, a total of 64 dogs on the study. To our knowledge, it's the largest prospective study ever looking at this to evaluate diet and cardiac function. Again, we measured not only blood and fecal metabolites, we have done echocardiograms on the dog, as well as looking at blood, skeletal muscle, and tissue amino acid levels. The study is actually complete. We finished it up earlier this year, and we are in the middle of analyzing all of this data. And I can tell you, as sure as I'm sitting here, it will take us longer to analyze all the data than it did to do the study. But that's the beauty of research. We have a lot of really good data, and now it's time for us to see what that data means. And then when we've drawn our conclusions from this study, the plan is we will then write this in a peer-reviewed fashion and submit it for publication. So that's all I really have. I think now, if Claudia wants to see if we've got any questions, or maybe you guys are all asleep and bored with this.
There are some questions, but I have one question. When you're conducting home feeding trials, how do you account for snacks?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So one of the requirements is the dogs, they don't get any during that time, and all of the folks who have these dogs, like I said earlier, I mean, I have a really good network with my own little passion and hobby with my bird dogs, and these guys are really good. The dogs, all they are getting is the diet. So it's really kind of the best of both worlds. It's doing branded research with non-research dogs that I think is really a true test of the diet.
Okay. Thank you. The diet-related DCM, has that been raised as an issue outside of the United States at all?
That is a really good question. So I know a lot of folks in the veterinary and the pet nutrition world in both Canada as well as Europe, And I've talked to a lot of those folks, and interestingly enough, um, it's not a real big topic, either north of our border or across the pond, which is really interesting. Now, I will say this, and I don't have data on grain-free uh, pet food sales in Europe. I know it's not as popular in Europe as it is in the United States, but having said that, I also know that there are grain-free pet foods, in a lot of European markets. Canada, though, I can tell you, Canada grain-free pet foods pretty popular in Canada. I can't really speak a lot for other areas of the world, but that's where most of my international colleagues who I've, talked to about this are.
Okay. Leslie asks, what are your thoughts on the copper content in commercial dog food? Are the current levels contributing to copper toxicity?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Leslie. I think the copper levels are like a lot of things. We formulate and we make pet foods based on NRC and AAFCO requirements, but I think those are always changing. I also think that, and I think this DCM research that we're doing, I think may actually open the door a little bit further in that I don't know that canine nutrition, or probably feline nutrition for that matter, is a one size fits all. Now, we do know that, different life stages have different requirements, growth and puppy diets versus adult maintenance. But I also think that there may be different micronutrient requirements. Copper would be one. I mentioned earlier that, and I feel pretty confident that there may be some individual dogs or individual dog breed that would benefit from taurine supplementation, as an example. And then there's probably other micronutrients as well. So I think, nutrition is like any science. It's an ongoing learn. It's kind of like practicing medicine. That's why we call it practice, because you're never a pro at it. You're always trying to get better. But no, that is a really good question.
Okay. Victoria asks, how are skeletal muscle and cardiac tissue amino acids measured?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thing. So what we do, it's something, and I'm not dodging the question, but if I don't say this, sometimes things when they pop into my mind. So about that feeding study, so all those dogs on that large feeding study, they were all adopted, so they are all in somebody's home now. That was one of the prerequisites when we did that, because we did not do that study with in-home feeding studies. And here's one of my dogs here looking for a treat now. But so the way we did those is when we when we do those, of course, the dogs are sedated in a lot of cases for some of these parameters. And so what we actually do, we worked with a board certified cardiologist actually at the University of Missouri. In fact, I collaborate with a lot of cardiologists, University of Missouri, Kansas State, Washington State, um, gosh, I'm trying to remember, New York. There's a lot of cardiologists that I collaborate with. The University of Missouri cardiologists actually performed endomyocardial biopsies on these dogs. So what it is the dogs are sedated and you actually do a cardiac catheterization procedure. Would be similar to like what you do in people, where you go in through jugular vein, run a little line down, take a very small biopsy of the inside of the ventricle. And then, of course, the dog is then, recovered, and, he's no worse for the wear. So that's how we actually measured it, because we thought that was really important. And interestingly enough, who put that bug in our ear was actually the FDA. So in one of the meetings we had with those folks, we were talking about, how we were doing our Afco feeding studies. We were looking at all these other things like taurine and carnitine and all these other sulfur-containing essential amino acids. And one very seasoned, astute, super smart individual who I've known for a long time at the FDA CVM, he jumped up and he said, "But how do you know what's in the dog's heart?" Meaning, how do you know what the taurine levels are in the dog's heart? Yeah, we can measure it in the blood, but how do you know that's equating to what's actually in the tissue? And it was like, you know what? He's right. So we actually included that in the study. And so what we do is then we look at plasma, whole blood, and I'll use taurine, for example, plasma, whole blood, taurine levels. And then you compare that to what's actually in the skeletal and the cardiac muscle and see how that correlation is. Because what we might find is that maybe a certain type of diet doesn't correlate with, taurine levels actually in the myocardium and the skeletal muscle. Because if you don't look, you won't know. But anyway, like I said, all of those dogs were just fine, and they're actually all living in uh, pet parents' houses as we speak. So that's a really good question.
Okay, great. Megan asks, she likes to rotate the diet she feeds her dogs, a husky and standard poodle. And right now she has 2 brands on rotations, but she would like to add another 1 or 2. Is brand rotation a possible way to avoid diet-related DCM?
Yeah, no, we get that question a lot about rotating foods, kind of the old, like I said, I'm an old guy, and it used to kind of be, oh, you put a dog on a diet, and it stayed on that for the rest of its life, and that's the way it should be. But you know what? I don't think that's necessarily the best way to do things. When you think about, I mean, take people, for example, we don't eat the same thing all the time. And I think diversity in a lot of cases is a really good thing because, and I'll take protein, for instance. All protein is protein, but the amino acid makeup of that protein is different. And a lot of times, if you rotate, different proteins, maybe if one might be a little bit lower in lysine, we'll take, for instance, and maybe another one's a little higher in that. I don't think that's a problem at all. And it's probably not even a bad idea if you wanted to rotate between brands, but I would say, do your research and call the companies and ask them the questions, like I put up there earlier, what kind of research have you done? What kind of feeding studies have you done? Do you have nutritional profiles for your diets? Those types of things. No matter what you're feeding, I think those are questions that you need to ask.
And, speaking of rotating and specifically rotating proteins, taurine, there are proteins that are a more robust source of taurine than others. So you want to rotate in and out of, some fowl is, introduce some fowl into the diet. Don't always, necessarily stick with a beef diet. You want to rotate your species as well. Your hot and your cold protein sources, fish. Mixing it up is good. Not to be a commercial for Signature, but if you're feeding a Signature, because they have so many different ranges of proteins within their offerings, it's a great opportunity to provide a good amount of variety, but staying within a brand. But there's nothing, you can also go outside of a brand too. There are many of us that are raw feeders, and as raw feeders, we're not very brand specific or loyal, because we know we need to get a good mix of the proteins in there and keep it change it up. So yes, I think rotating is a good thing. Not that you asked for my 2 cents, but I just and Tanya asks, what is your opinion on dog foods containing legumes and peas?
Yeah, no, that's kind of the $64 question here. I mean, I can tell you this. I'll answer that in this, and maybe this will give you an idea. My dogs eat usually. I've got so many different diets because I do all these, in-home AAFCO feeding studies. My dogs eat ancient grain. They eat grain-free. They eat legume-containing. They eat everything. And I can tell you, if I felt like that there was definitive reasons to avoid a certain type of diet, I sure as heck wouldn't feed it to my dogs. Um, Having said that, there is no definitive research that says it's good or it's bad. I think there's a lot of benefits from legumes, though. Generally speaking, legumes are a excuse me, a low glycemic type of ingredient for the most part. And I think this is important because, you don't get these up and down, glucose spikes. And, dogs are just like people. The more constant you can keep that, the better off, you can be, because really the number one problem, and this is what really amazes me, we have, and now I say we, I'm talking about the veterinary community. We have spent so much time the past few years, beating this, nutritionally related DCM topic. Not that it's not important, but what's way more important? Pet obesity. Pet obesity kills way more dogs than all DCM ever combined. And, I mean, everybody makes a light diet and they kind of talk about it, but there's no real focus on it out there. And it's kind of, it really baffles me. But anyway, I got off on a little tangent there, but.
No, but that's and in cats too. Diabetes in cats
Yep,
and is
exactly.
is rampant. So
Exactly.
um, we have some more questions. Shep Carr asks, he's concerned about with thyroid issues. It's pertaining to his cat. The majority of cat food that his cat likes have herring. Is that a concern for thyroid issues?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, that's really good. I would also, especially on, some of these cat diets that have a lot of really high real meat inclusions. Just again, look at the brand, contact the company, ask them for the nutritional profile. On that, I wouldn't necessarily think that it's going to have, a big problem for your cat with thyroid problems, but you want to be sure that you know what the nutritional profile is of that diet with any pet, and especially with a pet that has a known pre-existing condition, because you want to be really sure. And then what I also tell folks too is then take that information that the company provides you, take that to your veterinarian. Whoever is has diagnosed your pet with the condition, take that to them, and then have them evaluate it too. And here's the other thing: if you know some veterinarians are more nutritionally acute or spend more time focusing on nutrition than others. And if you're not satisfied that your veterinarian is focusing on the nutrition, there's a lot of veterinarians out there. Go find one who is.
Okay. Diane asks, do you pay attention to selenium? What about selenium yeast as well as inorganic selenium? As I am sure you know, this is important in ruminants, and we are talking about cardiac muscle.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question too. I mean, by and large, anytime you can use any organic form of any kind of a micronutrient, you're usually better off just because of bioavailability. Now, in the case of selenium, where you actually do have maximum levels or maximum recommended levels, you have to be careful about that. So I think not only in addition to getting nutritional analysis from companies asking about feeding studies, but also pay attention yourself on the ingredient decks. Read the labels. I actually had one of these researchers that published some of these DCM reports or papers here not too long ago. I actually heard this person say, quit reading pet food labels. In other words, the reason that she said that was, don't get caught up in feeding a brand of pet food just because it was on the label. And I actually cringed because, I mean, not only am I a veterinarian, so I think about stuff from a medical standpoint, but I'm also if I pet food formulation. I mean, I've done that for the past 18 years, and now I do a lot of the performance testing, like the Afco feeding testing. And you absolutely have to read labels. In fact, you need to not only read the label, but if something doesn't make sense on that label, you need to call the company and find out exactly what that is. Most companies should be following AAFCO guidelines on labeling, but if you see something you're not sure about, call them and ask them what it is. If you're considering that brand at all, but read the label. I don't care what anybody says. Read it, and if you're not sure about it, call them and ask them about it.
Okay. Charlotte asks, have you done feeding trials for reproduction, pregnant, lactating, and or growing puppies and kittens?
Yeah, no, that's a good question too. We actually do those, or we help manage those for brands. Now we don't do those on the in-home study because you have to coordinate. Obviously, the way those are done, you have to start feeding the gestating females, and then as they whelp, and then you have to follow through feeding it through to the puppies. So that all has to be timed. So those are actually done at contract research facilities. We don't do those with in-home dogs, but we actually do those for companies, yes.
Okay. And then Anthony asks, and I think this might be our last question. I'll go search through them again. And then I have a final question. What do you think of today's push to add probiotics to diets?
Yeah, no, that's a popular thing. Probiotics overall are really good. I think the one thing that again is important to know, you can add something, but what's really important is are those bacteria viable? A lot of times in processing, they may be inactivated for whatever reason, whether it's heat, pressure in the process, or something like that in the manufacturing process. So probably a good thing to do is to contact the manufacturer of that specific diet and ask them if they have data on actual live organisms, per cup, per kg, whatever the unit is, in the diet, if they've done studies to evaluate that. Actually, it's not even a study. It's actually taking the food and having it analyzed to see that those are actually viable. Because if pet food isn't processed right, you'll kill those good, beneficial bacteria. And then the other thing I would add to that is important to probiotics a lot of times is prebiotics, because and a lot of times those may be more important, because then what you're doing is you're letting the animal's GI tract select for its own good bugs or good I always call them bugs, but they're bacteria. You're selecting for the animals, letting the animals select for those good bacteria by using quality diets that contain prebiotics.
Is there such a thing as overdosing probiotics and prebiotics?
Yeah, probably the only thing about prebiotics that I could think of was if you were using, a prebiotic that contained, a lot of soluble fiber, which a lot of soluble fibers are really good prebiotics. But, if you overdo that, you could, maybe see some, poor stool quality. As far as probiotics, not really. Whatever you feed, the, you know, bacteria environment with a lot of different bacteria like living in the they tend to take care of themselves. Like you're when it comes to good bugs. Now bad bugs is another story. Like if you get a salmonella or something, enteritis, then and salmonella really grows rampant. But good bugs, they tend to take care of themselves. So the answer pretty simply is no. You're not going to overdose those. But, sometimes they come in as an expense, so you don't necessarily have to give more. More is not always better, I guess, is what I'm
Okay.
trying to say.
Victoria asks, do you have any simple recommendations for cancer-preventing diets for dogs? She has flat-coated retrievers.
I'm sorry for what?
Of cancer-preventing diets for dogs.
Oh, cancer.
She's got flat-coated retrievers.
Right.
Some of us have breeds that are
Yeah.
predisposed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, I wish I did. Unfortunately, that's one of those things that, you know, we just don't know enough about, and especially how nutrition relates to that. I mean, I will say this, and, not trying to get on a soapbox, but, probably most of the folks tuning in here aren't feeding a lot of diets with a lot of synthetic preservatives and colors and things like that. Obviously, I would recommend staying away from those. There's really no reason to feed diets containing those. That would be a very basic recommendation. As far as any diets to help prevent a predisposed breed from getting that, I really don't.
Okay. We have a few more questions. If you have a few more minutes for us, Dr. Quest.
Sure.
Okay, great. Um, Eva says that rotating diets can bring changing stools. So she prefers to stay with one brand for consistency of stool gas and diarrhea. And that actually, that especially when you change among brands. So sometimes changing within a brand will help alleviate that. But there's also, you can add probiotic, and there are things you can do to help ease a transition. So, but yes, we've all experienced that. Carol asks, is there any harm in simply adding taurine supplement on a regular basis to your dog's diet?
Yeah, no. Taurine's one of those micronutrients that you're not really, even if your dog is more than capable of biosynthesizing its own taurine, which most dogs are, or the current nutritional knowledge is all dogs are. Even though, like I said earlier, um, I am pretty convinced that there are individuals and potentially even individual breeds that can be have challenges biosynthesizing taurine. But having said that, no, it is not going to cause a problem. And I mean, if you really want to supplement taurine, a lot of diets now are actually adding taurine to the dog diet. So, and most of you probably know this because I'm sure this our viewing audience is pretty savvy. But taurine is a requirement though in feline diets, and that research happened back in the 80s and through the late 80s and even up through the early 90s, where we actually identified that cats do actually have a taurine requirement. But I also think that there may be some dogs, like I said, individuals or potentially even individual breeds that may have a taurine requirement as well.
Okay. Charlotte, Charlotte had asked about the feeding trials in pregnant and reproducing and puppies. So she wanted to know more specifically if Pets Global has done feeding trials and repro feeding trials.
Yeah, no, we do the adult feeding studies, and the reason why we do the adult feeding studies is because, and there's nothing wrong with those all life stage studies. The only thing is the things that we really want to measure in these dogs, like amino acids, taurine, carnitine, doing echocardiograms, things like that to measure whole health, not just cardiac health. The only way you can do that is in adult dogs. You're not going to be able to get any real meaningful data doing that in puppies. So we choose to do these in adult dogs.
Okay. And Megan asks, the probiotic question gave her one more question. She feeds joint supplements to both dogs. One is almost 7 and the other is 18 months and very active. And she's not sure if a joint supplement is necessary or needed, or if it could cause more harm for a young dog, do more harm than good at a young age.
Right. You know, and I apologize if you said, what the breeds were, but I think in a lot of especially breeds, larger breeds typically that may be, predisposed to, joint health problems. I don't think there's anything wrong with, supplementing those dogs with, some kind of a joint health supplement. Now, supplements are a whole different category. We usually call supplements the wild, wild west. And the reason for that is there is very little to no regulation at all when you play in the supplement category. Now, having said that, there are several brands out there that have done really good research. They have really good quality control, and I feel really confident in their products. I would always recommend, again, kind of like in the diets, if there's like a joint health supplement that you're interested in using, contact the company, talk to them about their quality control, ask them if they've done any kind of efficacy studies, with their supplement. I think that's really important. But no, I don't see any problem with using that proactively.
Okay. And Janet asks us if we'll be sending out a copy of this webinar. Yes, everybody who's attended or signed up for the webinar will be receiving an email in the next 24 to 48 hours with with a recording of the webinar. So, and then I have one final question. And what is your recommendation? What questions should we be asking if DCM is a concern to us as pet parents when we are looking at pet foods? I know you've talked multiple times about reaching out to the pet food manufacturer and asking questions. What are what are the three most important questions we should be asking?
Yeah, well, you've already said that one. I would, no matter whether it's a grain-free, grain-inclusive, whatever, um, ask the manufacturer, do they have nutritional analyses that they can share, and do they have feeding studies that they can share? Those are really important. And honestly, the digestibility studies are just as important too. I mean, we talked about that earlier because you can formulate a diet, but you want to also see how bioavailable that diet is, and that's what the digestibility study is going to tell you. Um, as far as DCM specifically is concerned, I mean, I feed all kinds of diets to my dogs. I feed diets to my dogs, and I'm sure everybody's seen this. The FDA published a list of diets back when they're one of their releases. I can tell you unequivocally, I have fed a lot of those diets to my own dogs, and I continue to feed a lot of those type of diets to my dogs as well. So, I mean, a lot of it, I guess, just lands where your comfort level is and what your knowledge level is. And I can tell you, I feel like our research team at BSM Partners, and I'm not saying we know everything about this, I can tell you, I doubt if there's any group of people that have spent more time researching this and probably spent more time performing prospective research on this, at least in the past couple of years, than we have. So, not saying that we know everything about it, but I can tell you this: I don't have any problem feeding any of those diets to my dogs.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time tonight, Dr. Quest. I think we all learned a great deal, and our customers are very educated, more educated than most. I think you could tell from the questions that some of us are breeders, or have multiple pets as well. So this is all very good information, and we appreciate your time this evening. So we want to thank all of you for participating this evening. You'll be receiving an email shortly, like I said, within the next 24 to 48 hours with a recording that you can watch at any time. Again, thank you, Pets Global, and especially thank you, Dr. Quest. We appreciate your time this evening. Everyone have a wonderful night. Thank you all. Thank you.